Alright, this is video lecture number 5. Video lecture number 5, I'm at Roman numeral 4, John Calvin. Okay, starting with letter A. Alright, John Calvin, you see his dates there, that's when he lived. Okay, now, letter A. John Calvin, first, before we get any further, let me make one more important point about Martin Luther. Martin Luther is seen as the founder of the Protestant Reformation. Okay, that's an important point you'll need to remember. Martin Luther is the founder of the Protestant Reformation. He's the guy who really got it started. Okay, now back to John Calvin. John Calvin, letter A, agreed with Luther on almost everything. He and Luther saw eye to eye on most of the arguments that he had with the Catholic Church. In fact, he agreed with Luther on all of the arguments that he had with the Catholic Church. But John Calvin had a different direction that he goes in. Slightly. Okay, so soon after Martin Luther really kind of gets the ball rolling, John Calvin, who was from the same region in general, not exactly, but close, John Calvin starts a new kind of sub-movement, within this Protestant Reformation. Here's what Calvin said. Letter B. Calvin and Luther agree with the absolute sovereignty of God. Now, they both agreed that God, the Creator God, existed and was absolutely in control of the universe, okay? But they had a little bit of a different take on things, okay? Martin Luther said that people have the freedom of choice to be saved. They can choose to have faith in Jesus or not. John Calvin didn't exactly believe that. John Calvin believed that God determined who would be saved and who would go to hell, who would be damned, if you will. Okay, John Calvin said that God, in creation, when he established the universe as we know it today, made a list of the saved and the damned from at that day, and there's nothing we can do to change that, according to Calvin. He established those who would live for him and those who would not, and you can't decide, oh my gosh, I'm not living in a very godly manner, I need to change my life. You have no control over that, according to John Calvin. Okay. Letter C. He called this idea predestination. We are predestined to be saved or damned. Okay, and we can't change that. That's predestination. It's the belief that God has made His plan from the beginning of who will be saved and who will not from the beginning of time. Okay. Letter D. The elect. Those are the people who will be saved. Those are the people that God chose as His people to be good, to live godly lives. Okay, that's the elect. And letter E, the reprobate, those are the people who will be damned, as predetermined by God. You can't change it. God laid it out, and that's the way it's going to be. Okay? So everybody falls into one of these categories, either the elect or the reprobate, the saved or the damned. Okay? The elect are the saved, the reprobate are the damned. Okay? And so, if that be the case, Martin Luther would argue, and a lot of people still argue this day. By the way, the idea of predestination still exists today in some churches. But if that be the case, Martin Luther questioned John Calvin as to why would anyone want to be a Christian if you can't do anything to change it. If you're going to be a Christian, you're going to want to be a Christian. It's going to be a naturally occurring thing that you can't do anything about. And if you're going to not be a Christian, if you're going to be a reprobate, well, there's not anything you can do about that either. So that's just it. Okay. So what's the deal? Why would anybody want to be a Christian if you can't, have any free will to determine how to live or what's going to happen? You can't make that decision. Yes, I want to be saved, or no, forget the church. I don't want any of that. Okay. That's not a decision for you to make. It's something that's just going to happen. Well, John Calvin said, in response to this question from Luther, that we should live a pious life. That means we should live a godly seeming life. We should look like we're being godly people because that is the right way to be. That is the good way to be. That's how you create a good society. And so, in order for this to be understood, you had to break it down for folks. You had to tell folks exactly what they could and could not do. And so, under letter F, you see Calvinist crimes. There are a lot of crimes prescribed by Calvin as things that godly folks do not do. So if you want to look like a saved person, okay, then you need to be obedient to these laws. You don't need to be breaking these Calvinist crimes. And they include things like gambling. They included things like drinking alcohol. They included things like using profanity. They included things like dancing. All these telling dirty jokes. All those things were against Calvinist crimes, and they would be punished likewise. Okay, so everybody's supposed to follow these laws, knowing the fact, according to Calvin, that you don't know if you're going to be saved or not, but you still have to follow the laws. You have to live as a godly person to create this pious or good, God-seeming, or outwardly appearing godly society. Okay, we see the idea of predestination still exists in the Presbyterian Church, among many other churches. Predestination still exists. So Calvin, while he agreed with Luther that there were a lot of problems with the Catholic Church, Calvin saw a lot of things that Luther believed were right as not right. Calvin had a different take on the absolute sovereignty of God and how much control God had over society. Martin Luther said that God has control over everything in the universe, but he allows people the choice to make the decision whether they want to be godly or not. Where Calvin disagreed, he said people have no choice in that. It's just going to happen or not. Okay? Alright, that will conclude my discussion of John Calvin, and it will also conclude this video.